The stars had never seemed so cold. Captain Elias Rourke stared out of the cracked viewport of his small scout ship, the Vanguard, as a storm unlike anything in recorded space charts tore across the void. It was a cosmic maelstrom, a swirling wall of plasma and radiation, moving faster than the ship could outrun. Red sparks danced across the ship's hull, and alarms screamed inside his cockpit. The Vanguard shook violently with each pulse of energy that hit it, making Elias grip the controls with white-knuckled intensity. "Come on, come on," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the roaring warning sirens. Every system in the ship screamed at him. Power failure imminent, shields failing, life support unstable. Elias had trained for this, simulated storms in star simulators, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing could have. The storm seemed alive, a force that hated all forms of life, all ships, all things that moved. The navigation console blinked red, flashing the words, "Crash imminent." Elias yanked the steering yoke to the left, but it was too late. The ship's hull groaned like metal in pain. He braced for impact, gripping the controls as if sheer will could save him. A violent jolt threw him forward, and the world went black for a moment. When his eyes opened, the ship was no longer moving. Sparks danced along the walls, and smoke filled the cabin. He coughed, pressing a hand to his chest, feeling the burn of adrenaline. The Vanguard had survived, barely, but the storm was still there, stretching endlessly across space, a wall of impossible energy. Any attempt to move would be suicide. Elias scanned the sensors. The ship's engines were fried. Communications were dead. Life support was weak, but there was a faint ping nearby. Something old. Something abandoned. A station. A relay station. Drifting silently near a dead star. Its metal hull reflected the storm's eerie glow. It looked fragile, a forgotten relic of a long-lost age, but it was better than drifting alone in the storm, slowly being torn apart. Elias suited up, checking oxygen levels and pressure seals. He opened the small airlock, the vacuum of space rushing in for a moment, before he sealed the outer hatch behind him. His jet boots fired, and he maneuvered toward the station. Every push against the void made his muscles ache. Radiation from the storm burned against the edges of his suit, but his focus never wavered. One goal: survive. Get inside. The station door was old and rusted, but functional. Elias pried it open and stumbled inside, collapsing on the floor as the interior lights flickered weakly to life. The air was breathable, though stale, thick with dust and the smell of long abandonment. He dragged himself to a small control panel, trying to bring life to the station. Some systems powered on, others refused. It was barely functioning, but it was enough to provide a single room with stable life support. One room, one bed, one chance. As he explored, he realized something strange. The station was not completely empty. A figure crouched near the far wall, partially hidden in the shadows. It was an alien, Kethvar, from the records he had studied long ago. A species that once dominated politics in the galaxy, calculating and ruthless. Elias froze. The alien froze. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Kethvar stepped forward slowly, revealing a sleek, armored frame and glowing, calculating eyes. "You are human," the alien said, voice calm but edged with suspicion. "I did not expect to find you here." "And I did not expect to find you," Elias replied, keeping his hands visible, showing no aggression. "Looks like the storm trapped us both." Kethvar scanned the room and nodded toward the only functional life support pod. "This is the only area where we can survive. The rest of the station is failing. Outside, the storm will kill us instantly." Elias looked around at the small room. One bed, one heater. Barely enough oxygen for two, if carefully rationed. He realized immediately that there would be no space for argument, no room for pride, no room to escape. He nodded slowly. "Then we stay here, for now." Kethvar studied him. The alien had grown up believing humans were weak, reckless, and short-lived. but Elias remained calm. Calm despite the storm outside. Calm despite the damage to his ship. Calm despite the fact that any wrong move could kill them both. That calmness was alien in itself. Hours passed. The storm outside raged on without mercy. Elias and Kethvar sat in the room, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the station's failing systems. Elias rationed his remaining supplies. Water, energy bars, a tiny packet of nutrients, each sip, each bite, calculated to last. Kethvar observed silently, noting how human endurance was not just about survival, it was about strategy, patience, and adaptation. "Why are you not panicking?" Kethvar asked finally. "Humans usually." The alien paused, struggling to put the words together. "Break under such conditions. You are supposed to panic, to exhaust yourselves, to fail." Elias smiled faintly, a small curve in the midst of exhaustion. "We adapt. That's what humans do. We do not break easily. And panic doesn't help anyone survive a storm that can melt your hull in seconds." The alien tilted its head, intrigued. "Interesting. Your species has survived many threats. Yet you are considered fragile by my kind. Why?" "Because we learn," Elias replied simply. "We survive not by being the strongest, but by using what we have. By thinking. By waiting. By refusing to give up." The storm outside intensified, sending shudders through the station. Sparks flew from exposed circuits. Alarms warned of failing gravity and radiation surges. Elias moved quickly, repairing small systems with a mix of ingenuity and desperation. Kethvar assisted reluctantly, following instructions precisely, though clearly fascinated by human improvisation. By the second day, a strange routine had formed. They took turns sleeping on the single bed. Backs turned, eyes open, always ready. They shared minimal conversation, yet each learned from the other. Elias learned about Kethvar's species, their politics, their history of galactic dominance and manipulation. Kethvar learned about humans, their resilience, their wars, their ability to endure impossible odds. When the gravity systems failed briefly, sending them floating inside the small room, Elias anchored himself and guided Kethvar. Together, they managed to stabilize the situation. Kethvar realized that the alien perception of humans as weak was flawed. Here, in a room barely large enough for two, trapped by a storm that could shred any ship, a human was surviving, thriving, even. "You are persistent," Kethvar said, finally acknowledging the truth. "Your species, it refuses to die, even when all odds are against it." Elias nodded, sitting down carefully on the bed for a moment's rest. "Persistence is all we have. That, and hope." The alien studied him, silent for a long moment, as the storm outside roared with unrelenting fury. Both understood the truth. There was no escape. Not until the storm ended, or one of them failed. But the room, the bed, the small sanctuary inside a failing station, had become a place of resilience, of survival, of human will, proving itself. As night, or the closest approximation inside a station without proper lights, fell, Elias closed his eyes, listening to the storm. He thought of his crew, of the galaxy waiting outside, of the challenge ahead, and somewhere deep inside, he smiled. Humans had survived worse. They would survive this too. Kethvar, watching, realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Humans were not weak. They were not fragile. They endured storms, wars, and betrayals. And here, trapped together, the alien began to understand that this human, Elias, embodied everything his species had once underestimated: one room, one bed, and no escape from the storm. Yet, for the first time, the alien felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, in a universe full of storms and dangers, humans were meant to survive not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to break. The storm showed no mercy. Outside the thick walls of the old relay station, lightning arcs of cosmic energy danced violently across the void. Elias Rourke sat on the edge of the single bed, rubbing his eyes and listening to the hum of failing life support. Every vibration of the station reminded him of how fragile their shelter was. One wrong move, one failure of the systems, and the storm would claim them both. Kethvar stood near the wall, arms crossed, watching him closely. The alien's gaze was sharp, calculating, as though it were trying to understand the human's strange mixture of calm and determination. The alien species had survived countless crises in the galaxy, but even they had not seen a human handle such a situation with this level of composure. Kethvar had expected panic, screams, and mistakes. What they got was strategy and patience. Elias finally spoke, breaking the silence. "We need to ration supplies more carefully. The storm isn't letting up, and our life support isn't perfect. One mistake could kill us both." Kethvar inclined their head. "Your species values efficiency and survival. Interesting. You do not panic. Yet you still understand danger better than most. Why do you not give in to fear?" "Fear doesn't help," Elias replied simply. "It wastes energy and slows thinking. If we survive this, it will be because we stayed calm and worked together. That's what humans do." For the next several hours, they worked in uneasy cooperation. Elias checked the station's oxygen recycler, repairing tubes and circuits with careful precision. Sparks flew and alarms rang out. But Elias remained steady, guiding Kethvar to hand him tools and follow simple instructions. Each movement was deliberate. Kethvar was surprised most species would panic and make things worse. Humans, he realized, were not like others. They adapted under pressure. At one point, a loud groaning noise shook the station. A section of the outer hull was bending under the force of the storm. Elias's eyes widened as he assessed the damage. "If this breaks, the room won't be safe. We'll lose oxygen in minutes. We have to stabilize it. Then you will go outside," Kethvar said matter-of-factly. "The storm will kill you." Elias shook his head. "No, we do it together. I guide you. You follow. We survive together." The alien hesitated, but finally agreed. Suited up and tethered, they ventured into the corridor, moving carefully. Each step was a fight against the shaking, metal-bending walls. Radiation alarms flashed across their visors. Sparks from torn wires made the air smell acrid and hot. Elias directed Kethvar to hold structural supports, while he sealed cracks with metal patches and emergency welding. Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of weakening. Inside the small room, they returned, covered in soot and sweat, breathing heavily. Elias collapsed onto the single bed. "We did it," he said, voice hoarse. "It's not perfect, but it will hold." Kethvar watched him quietly. The alien's mind was full of questions. In their species' records, humans were fragile, reckless, short-lived, and yet, here they were, surviving, adapting, even leading. The alien realized something important. Humans did not merely survive by chance. They survived because they refused to surrender. The next day, the storm intensified further. Cosmic debris hit the station like meteors, shaking the metal walls violently. Sensors showed radiation spikes. The gravity field fluctuated, sending them floating helplessly into the low ceiling. Elias held onto the bed, adjusting pressure stabilizers, guiding Kethvar. Together, they managed to restore balance. The alien's confidence in the human's skill grew with each task. During a brief quiet period, Elias and Kethvar shared their first real conversation. "You are very different from what I expected," Kethvar said. "Your species is supposed to panic, fail, and die. Yet you plan, adapt, and survive under conditions that would destroy my kind." Elias chuckled softly, though tiredly. "Humans have survived things that would make almost any species give up. We've survived plagues, wars, starvation, betrayal, and now storms in deep space. We survive because we have to, because we want to, and because we never stop trying. You may call it reckless, but it works. Kethvar was silent, processing the words. Elias continued. Look, we have one room, one bed, and one chance. That's all we get. So we do what we can with what we have. That's all anyone can do. For Kethvar, this was a revelation. The alien had spent centuries believing humans were weak, disposable, and short-sighted. But here, in a room barely larger than a coffin, the human had survived alone and helped the alien survive as well. And not just survived, they had adapted, improvised, and even protected the alien. By the third day, their routine became essential. One would rest on the single bed while the other monitored the systems. One would eat or drink while the other calculated reserves. Each movement, each action, was carefully coordinated. There was no room for argument, no room for ego, no room for mistakes. The storm raged outside, and their survival depended entirely on cooperation. Elias used the time to teach Kethvar simple techniques for station repair, rationing, and navigation. The alien was a quick learner, but could not hide their admiration. Humans were not the fragile creatures they had been led to believe. They were intelligent, adaptable, and persistent. The alien felt a new emotion, respect. As the storm pushed on into its fourth day, a new threat emerged. The radiation levels surged sharply. Alarms screamed. Life support was failing again. The room grew dangerously cold. Elias worked quickly, guiding Kethvar through a series of repairs that would stabilize temperature and pressure. But each action drained their energy further. You're doing more than I expected, Kethvar said, voice low. Even in exhaustion, you continue to work, continue to adapt. I am impressed. Elias smiled faintly. Humans survive by keeping hope alive, even when everything else is against them. We don't give up just because it's hard. That's how we've made it this far. The alien looked at the human lying back on the bed, exhausted, yet determined. A strange feeling arose, something unfamiliar to their species. Admiration. Maybe even envy. Humans, Kethvar realized, were unpredictable in a way that made them dangerous, capable, and astonishing. As the hours passed, Elias began to drift into sleep, leaning against the single bed. Kethvar remained awake, watching the storm through the reinforced viewport. The alien considered the human's words: persistence, adaptation, intelligence, hope. Perhaps this species, often underestimated, was more than a survivor. Perhaps it was a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. Suddenly, the station shuddered violently. The storm outside had intensified, sending a wave of cosmic energy slamming into the hull. Sparks flew, circuits melted, and alarms screamed. Elias groaned and pushed himself upright. We need to stabilize the outer hull again. It's cracking under the pressure. Kethvar nodded and prepared for another trip into the corridor. The alien paused, looking at the human. You will go first, Kethvar said cautiously. Elias shook his head. No. We go together. We survive together. That's the only way. The alien studied him for a moment, then nodded. Humans truly were persistent. They did not just survive, they fought. And in that fight, they inspired others to act, even aliens who had once considered them weak. With suits sealed, tethers fastened, and determination burning in their eyes, Elias and Kethvar stepped into the corridor again. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and radiation flickered across their visors. Every step was a challenge. Every move counted. Yet, step by step, they reached the damaged section of the hull. Elias worked with calm precision, instructing Kethvar on what to do. Together, they sealed cracks, reinforced metal, and stabilized pressure. When they returned to the small room, exhausted but alive, Kethvar finally spoke. Your species is remarkable. I understand now. Humans are not weak. They endure, they adapt, and they survive where others fail. I did not expect this. Elias smiled tiredly, sitting down on the single bed. You should get used to it. Humanity doesn't give up. No matter what the universe throws at us, we endure. That's what we do. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the small room, something had changed. The alien had seen the truth of human endurance, and Elias, lying back on the single bed, had proven once again that even in the smallest room, with the smallest resources, humans could survive anything. One room, one bed, and no escape from the storm. Yet, for the first time, the alien felt a flicker of hope. Hope that humans could survive anything, even the universe itself. The cosmic storm had grown worse. Outside, the black void was alive with violent arcs of energy, swirling clouds of plasma, and debris moving faster than the eye could follow. The relay station groaned under the relentless assault. Each pulse of the storm made the metal walls shiver, sending shudders through the small, fragile room where Elias and Kethvar had taken refuge. Every system was on the edge of failure. Oxygen levels fluctuated. Gravity dipped in waves. Radiation flickered through the cracked hull like ghostly fingers. Elias lay on the single bed for a moment, exhausted from hours of repairs and stabilization. Sweat ran down his face under the helmet of his suit, and his muscles ached from the continuous strain. But there was no time to rest for long. Every minute counted. Every second outside the storm's fury threatened death. Kethvar was pacing the small room. The alien's movements tight and controlled, but clearly tense. Normally composed, the alien now revealed a rare vulnerability. The storm. It is unlike anything I have encountered, Kethvar said quietly. Even our species, we would have retreated. Yet you human, you remain calm. Why? Elias looked up, catching his breath. Because panicking doesn't help. The storm will not stop. The station is failing. We either adapt or we die. There's no other option. For the alien, that simple statement was revolutionary. Humans survived not because they were stronger, or faster, or more technologically advanced. They survived because they refused to give up, because they thought clearly under pressure, and because they acted decisively when the universe itself threatened to crush them. The alarm screamed again. Radiation spikes surged suddenly, hitting levels that could fry exposed circuits in seconds. The temperature dropped sharply. The single room felt smaller, colder, more dangerous. Elias sprang into action, guiding Kethvar through emergency procedures to stabilize the air and shield their bodies from radiation. You need to rest, Kethvar said sharply, their voice more commanding than before. You have been working beyond safe limits. If you fail, Elias shook his head. I can't. Not yet. We can survive this, but only if I finish stabilizing the outer hull. The breach is widening. If it breaks, we die. The alien studied him, perplexed. Elias was fragile. Yes. Physically weakened by exhaustion and radiation. Yet the human's mind was unbreakable. It calculated, adapted, and acted without hesitation. Kethvar's species believed humans could not endure such extreme stress. But here was proof to the contrary. Finally, Kethvar nodded. Then, I will follow your instructions exactly. But do not underestimate your limits, human. Together, they suited up and ventured into the corridor once more. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. And the hull bent under the storm's relentless assault. Each step was a calculated risk. Each action could mean life or death. Elias directed Kethvar to anchor support beams while he sealed cracks in the hull using improvised materials from the station's storage. Radiation alarms flashed on their visors, and the storm's energy pulsed like a heartbeat outside. Halfway through the repair, the hull groaned violently. A section began to bend inward. Elias's hands worked rapidly, welding the metal and shoving reinforcements into place. A sudden blast of radiation hit Kethvar's suit, sending them staggering back. Elias lunged, supporting the alien's weight while continuing to work. Sparks and heat burned around them. The single room behind them was no longer just a refuge, it was a memory of safety they could not reach until the storm ended. Hours felt like days. Sweat, fatigue, and fear pressed down on them, yet they continued. Kethvar, normally calm and collected, was shocked by the humans' endurance. Elias's species did not simply react, they calculated, adapted, and survived. And that endurance was contagious. The alien found themselves following Elias's guidance instinctively, trusting the human's judgment despite danger, despite exhaustion. Finally, they returned to the small room, bruised and scorched but alive. Elias collapsed on the single bed, gasping for air. Kethvar helped support him, guiding him gently to the mattress. For the first time, the alien felt gratitude not just for being saved, but for witnessing the human spirit in action. You risked yourself to save me, Kethvar said quietly, almost uncomfortably. I should have survived without your help. My species, we would not have done the same. Elias smiled faintly, though exhaustion made it a ghost of a grin. Humans survive together. We protect each other. That's why we last. That's why we endure. Alone, we might fail. But together, we adapt and survive. The alien stared at him, silent. It was not just the words, it was the truth in the action. Humanity was different, unpredictable, persistent, relentless. By the fourth day, the storm had reached an intensity they had not imagined possible. Sensors warned of hull collapse. Radiation spiked with each passing hour. The station's energy core fluctuated dangerously. Life support could fail at any moment. Yet Elias remained calm, continuing to guide Kethvar through emergency measures. The single bed became not just a place to rest, but a hub for survival strategies. They shared rationed food and water in silence, too exhausted to speak, too aware that every second counted. Then, the unthinkable happened. A new alarm blared, hull breach detected in the main corridor. The storm had weakened the outer sections beyond their previous calculations. A crack was forming, threatening the room they called their sanctuary. Elias sprang to his feet, adrenaline coursing through him despite exhaustion. We have no time. This breach will ruin everything. We have to stabilize it now. Or we die. Kethvar looked at him, fear briefly flickering across alien features. If we leave this room, we will face the storm directly. We will not survive. Elias's eyes were steady, burning with determination. Then we survive, because we have to. That's what humans do. The alien nodded. For the first time, Kethvar followed not out of obligation, but out of belief. Humans inspired confidence. Even under conditions that would destroy others, they ventured out together. The station groaned, sparks flying as the hull bent under the storm's pressure. Radiation washed over them in invisible waves, but Elias moved with precise, calculated motions. Kethvar followed, replicating his actions with careful attention. Together, they worked to seal the widening crack. A sudden wave of plasma energy hit the station from outside, throwing them against the wall. Elias groaned, but pressed on, dragging a reinforcement plate into position. Kethvar struggled, nearly losing balance, and the human caught the alien just in time, shielding them from further damage. In that moment, Kethvar realized something profound. Humans were not just survivors, they were protectors. They endured danger not only for themselves, but for others. They were persistent, adaptive, and willing to risk everything. The alien's entire understanding of human fragility was shattered. Hours later, they returned to the small room, battered but alive. Elias collapsed on the single bed, breathing heavily. Kethvar sat nearby, quietly observing. The alien's mind was alive with new understanding. Humans were capable of incredible endurance, of ingenuity under pressure, and of courage that surpassed any expectation. You are extraordinary, Kethvar said softly. Your species. I underestimated them. I underestimated you. I underestimated you. Elias chuckled weakly, exhaustion pulling at his voice. Don't worry. Most species do. But it's fine. We survive anyway. As the storm continued to rage outside, the room grew quiet. They shared a moment of understanding. A bond formed not through friendship, but through shared survival. The alien now realized that humans did not break under pressure. They adapted, they endured, they survived when all else failed, and in that tiny, fragile room, with the single bed as the only symbol of comfort and rest, Kethvar understood a truth that would change everything. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to give up. One room, one bed, and no escape from the storm. Yet the storm was not the end, it was a test, and humans, Elias, in particular, had already begun to prove that even the universe itself could not defeat them. The storm raged like a living beast, thrashing the relay station with waves of plasma and debris. The station's metal hull groaned under the constant assault, and the small room, once a safe haven, with its single bed, felt smaller than ever. Elias Rourke sat on the bed, staring at the flickering monitors. His body was exhausted, battered by days of repairs, radiation exposure, and constant stress. Yet his mind remained alert, calculating, planning. Kethvar stood nearby, watching him with a mixture of awe and fear. The alien had learned a hard truth. Humans were not fragile. They did not break under pressure. They adapted. They endured, and they inspired others, even aliens who had once underestimated them. Suddenly, the station's sensors screamed. A new threat had appeared. Distant ships, moving quickly through the storm toward their location. The alien fleet. They are coming, Kethvar said, voice tense. They will destroy the station and us, if they arrive. Elias rose slowly, every movement deliberate despite the fatigue. Then we stop them, he said calmly. We have survived worse. We will survive this too. Kethvar looked at him, astonished. The human was not just thinking about surviving the storm, they were thinking about survival in a war against an entire fleet. Elias rushed to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys. He accessed the station's communications array. Long damaged but not entirely dead. With careful calculations, he redirected the storm's energy into a concentrated pulse. The plan was risky. One miscalculation, and the station could implode. But it was the only chance they had. Kethvar assisted, following Elias's instructions precisely. The alien moved with careful precision, amazed at how humans could plan under extreme stress. Every wire connected, every circuit rerouted, every calculation checked and double-checked. Finally, Elias initiated the pulse. The storm outside seemed to respond, shifting violently as the station released a massive surge of energy. Lightning arcs from the storm were redirected, forming a protective shield around the station. The alien fleet slowed, confused by the sudden interference. Sensors from the ships showed energy readings far beyond anything they had anticipated. They are retreating, Kethvar said in disbelief. The pulse it is too powerful for them to approach. Elias allowed himself a brief smile, though exhaustion pulled at his body. Humans survive by turning challenges into opportunities. The universe doesn't defeat us. We find a way. But the storm was not done. The station shook violently as cracks appeared in secondary hull sections. Elias directed Kethvar to reinforce the weak points. Together, they worked with precision, patching hull breaches, stabilizing life support, and preparing for whatever the storm would throw next. The alien moved faster than they ever had, motivated by the human's calm determination. Hours passed. The storm began to weaken slowly, but danger remained. Debris still slammed against the station. Radiation spiked intermittently. The outer hull could collapse at any moment. Yet Elias did not rest. His mind worked constantly, planning, calculating, adapting. Then, a faint signal appeared on the monitor. a human rescue fleet, responding to his distress call from before the storm blocked communications. Ships moved carefully through the storm, shields active, weapons ready. Hope arrived at last. Kethvar watched as Elias coordinated with the fleet, guiding them to a safe approach despite the storm's interference. The alien realized something extraordinary. Humans did not just survive. They organized, adapted, and led even in chaos. Elias's species turned desperation into strategy. The rescue ships approached, and small drones began repairing external hull damage remotely. Life support systems stabilized. The single room, once a tiny refuge in a universe of danger, became a hub for survival and recovery. Elias allowed himself a brief rest on the single bed, breathing deeply. Kethvar knelt nearby, studying the human. You were right, Kethvar said finally. Humans endure when all else fails. You adapt. You survive. You lead. Even when faced with extinction. I understand now, Elias nodded. Exhaustion etched on his face but pride in his eyes. We survive because we have to, and because we refuse to give up. That's humanity. That's how we make it through storms, wars, betrayals, and death itself. We endure. The alien studied him quietly, then did something unexpected. Kethvar activated a communicator to their species' fleet. The message was simple, honest, and unexpected. They requested asylum with humanity. They admitted the truth their species had ignored for centuries. Humans were not fragile. Humans were strong. Humans could survive anything. As the storm finally began to fade into cosmic calm, the rescue fleet arrived fully. Human crews boarded the station, stabilizing damaged sections, bringing supplies, and evacuating survivors. Elias and Kethvar walked together to the docking bay. The alien observed the human crews, disciplined, coordinated, and relentless in their efficiency. You see now, Elias said quietly. Humans survive not because we are the strongest, but because we endure. Because we adapt. Because we refuse to give up, and when others underestimate us, we use it to our advantage. Kethvar nodded, understanding fully. This small room, this single bed, this storm, none of it had broken them. It had revealed the true nature of humanity, a species capable of survival against impossible odds, unbreakable even in the darkest moments. As they left the station, the human fleet guiding them safely through the debris-filled void, Kethvar turned to Elias. I will serve humanity, they said solemnly. I will protect, learn, and endure alongside you. I see now that to survive with humans is to survive with the strongest in the galaxy. Elias smiled faintly. Welcome to the team. Humanity is not just about strength. It's about endurance, intelligence, and persistence. You've survived your first storm with us. That's all it takes to start. The storm finally faded completely, leaving the vast expanse of space calm and silent. Stars shimmered once again, and the dead star near the relay station no longer seemed threatening. The station, battered but intact, stood as a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and courage. Kethvar gazed at Elias and the rescue crews, realizing something profound. Humans survived storms, wars, betrayal, and galactic politics. Humans endured where others failed. And humans would continue to endure, because giving up was not an option. One room, one bed, and no escape from the storm. Yet humanity had survived, not by chance, but by choice. By determination. By sheer persistence. The alien fleet that had once sought to eliminate them had been forced to retreat. The storm, the universe, the dangers of space, none had defeated the human spirit. Elias, the human captain, had proven what all humans already knew. Survival was not a matter of luck. Survival was a matter of will. As the rescue ships guided the battered relay station to safety, Kethvar reflected on the events. This small room, this tiny bed, and the storm that had trapped them, it had taught a lesson the galaxy would not forget. Humans were not to be underestimated. They endured, they adapted, and they triumphed when all others would fail. Elias, leaning back against the single bed one last time before leaving, looked at the alien and said softly, "You've seen it now. Humans survive, and we always will." Kethvar nodded, the alien's eyes reflecting both awe and respect. Humanity had not only survived, they had proven themselves extraordinary. In a universe full of storms, challenges, and impossible odds, one thing was certain. Humans endured, and that endurance would echo across the stars for generations to come.